What is going on, everybody? Hope everybody's enjoying their day so far. We are back with some more fantasy football content. Today, we're going to be giving you the Week 8 fantasy football waiver wire ads on players you need to be looking at rostering heading into the new week of this NFL season. So today, we're going to be giving you one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, and two tight ends. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this week's waiver wire ads. Starting with the quarterback position, we're going to ride with the hot hand of Joe Flacco of the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, this was definitely by far the best game of the season for the Bengals outside of Joe Burrow being their starting quarterback. Now, I know that this is definitely going to be an outlier, but he does have some really nice matchups defensive-wise, going up against New York Jets and the Chicago Bears, and then they'll have their bye week. So just keep that in mind. This is more of going over to the matchup. So if you are looking for a streaming quarterback, if you're dealing with an injury like Jake Daniels, or with Brock Purdy still being out. We'll see if Brock Purdy's going to be playing this week or not. But Joe Flacco is definitely an interesting name. I know that Jackson Dart is going to be a popular name, but I feel like a lot of people already have Jackson Dart, so I feel like Joe Flacco, especially with Matthew Stafford, being on the bye week. If Stafford wasn't on the bye week, Matthew Stafford would have been on this list. But we're going to roll with Joe Flacco, and like I mentioned, coming off of that sensational Thursday night performance against the Pittsburgh Steelers where you saw Jamar Chase have a blow-up game. You saw T. Higgins get more involved in this offense. Chase Brown have, an okay performance in PPR formats. He was able to get you there if you did start Chase Brown. But 342 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. So mainly the volume that Joe Flacco is going to provide to your fantasy teams is going to be through the pass. I know that he had a couple of rushes, but he's not going to be that elite rushing quarterback that you're looking at like Jackson Dart. But 25.98 fantasy points against Pittsburgh Steelers defense that has definitely had some question marks every single week. They were supposed to be a top 10 fantasy defense, but they just haven't really performed this season so far. Looking at week 8, like I mentioned, the matchup against the New York Jets. Now, I know the Jets are coming off of a performance where they only let up 13 points against the Carolina Panthers. But let's be real, the Bengals definitely have a lot more playmakers than the Panthers do at this moment. So Week 8 projected total points at 16.6. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets back up into the 20 points again. I could definitely see 2 or 3 touchdowns, pretty much the same passing volume that he provided. You have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown being that receiving back. So this is definitely not one of the best offenses in the league, but it's definitely viable enough for Joe Flacco to provide, that starting quarterback fantasy points that you're looking for every single week. And he's only rostered in 5% of leagues, so he's definitely obtainable, unlike some other quarterbacks like I mentioned at the top with Jackson Dart. I know that a lot of people are going to be saying Jackson Dart. If Jackson Dart is available on the waiver wire, definitely go pick him up. But if not, Joe Flacco would definitely be a nice option over the next couple of weeks because he does face off against some of the more bottom defenses in all of the leagues. So that is our quarterback ad. Now let's go on to our running back ad. And we're going to go to Chicago here for the running back, Kyle Monangai of the Chicago Bears. Now, I know you're going to be saying DeAndre Swift by far is the bell cow running back, but what you're starting to see here from Ben Johnson is really similar to what we saw in Detroit with both Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Looking at Monangai, definitely his best performance of the season so far against the New Orleans Saints defense that isn't great so far this season. 13 attempts, 81 yards and 1 touchdown. So you got there alone in the rushing department, and he added on 2 receptions for 13 yards. So I'm not going to say that he's going to be doing this every single week, but could definitely get that rushing touchdown and then add on some receiving yards. That's exactly what you're looking for, especially in PPR formats. Good enough for week 7 fantasy points at 17.4 against the Saints. A nice matchup once again against the Baltimore Ravens, who ranked 30th against running backs. The Ravens still dealing with some injuries on the defensive side. We'll see if they get any of those key players back because the Ravens are coming off of the bye week. So this could be a high-scoring matchup once again that the Bears are involved in, especially if Lamar Jackson is back and they get some key weapons. I know that Mark Andrews has been dealing with an injury. He's been nicked up. But look for this Ravens offense to bounce back. But I just don't know if the defense is going to bounce back in this matchup. Against the Chicago offense, I know that Caleb Williams only had like 5 fantasy points, but the running backs, both of DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai, were able to get you there. But Monangai, definitely a solid RB2 for you moving forward for the Bears. It looks like he has really cemented himself into that role. So Monangai going forward, definitely a flex play depending on matchups, and this would definitely be one of the top matchups I'll be looking at for the Monungai to beat in my starting lineup. Only rostered in 4% of leagues, so like Flacco, he is attainable as well. Now let's move on to our next running back, Brashard Smith of the Kansas City Chiefs. Now this is definitely a committee backfield in Kansas City. Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt has really been a split backfield, but you're starting to see Brashard Smith get more involved in the passing game. Now this game was a blowout of the Raiders, so the script is going to change every single week, whether it's a blowout for the Chiefs or if it's a close game. But looking at his Week 7 stats, like I mentioned, in that blowout victory at home against the Raiders, he had 14 rushing attempts, so the rushing volume definitely ticked up more in this game because, Pacheco and the starters pretty much were out the game by half because this game was pretty much over by then. 39 rushing yards, and like I mentioned, he does give you there with that receiving volume as well. 5 receptions, 42 yards. Now, there's a lot of mouths to feed in this offense. So you got Rashee Rice coming back, Travis Kelce had himself a game too, and then you have more receivers. Look at Xavier Worthy as well as Hollywood Brown. But you are starting to see Brashard Smith, the rookie out of SMU, really get involved in this offense, getting you Week 7 fantasy points at 13.1. Looking at the matchup, the Washington Commanders defense just look abysmal this past week against the Dallas Cowboys, allowing 44 points. So I could definitely see the Chiefs have the same success that Dallas was able to have. So this could be another high-scoring game that the Chiefs are involved in on their side. Might be a runaway, depending on if Jane Daniels plays or not in this game. But looking at Week 8 projected total points, 6.5, I definitely think that this is just a stash moving forward. I wouldn't be starting Brashard Smith. You would just be looking for that same stat line that he did against the Raiders. So this is more of a stash for now, but he is rostered in 3% of leagues. So definitely go get the rookie running back out of Brashard Smith for the Chiefs. Other running backs that I have mentioned in the past that would still be viable to pick up this week is Tyjae Spears. Looks like he is starting to get more involvement in the Tennessee Titans offense that I know isn't great, but the volume is definitely there both in the rushing game and the receiving game. So that's just another running back to keep in mind this week. Now let's go on to the wide receivers, which to me, I think that this is going to be the most popular pickup of the week, especially with the Mike Evans injury. Tez Johnson of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was definitely a tragic situation there for Mike Evans. He literally returns after missing like 3 to 4 games with a hamstring injury, and now he's more than likely going to be out for the season. So that's going to open up some targets for this Tampa Bay Buccaneer offense that didn't look great. You got to give credit to the Detroit Lions defense. They were able to really shut down this Tampa Bay offense that was one of the best in the NFL. But looking at Week 7 stats in that Monday night game against the Lions, 4 receptions, 58 yards, 1 touchdown. He could have had another touchdown, but Baker Mayfield overthrew him there. So his day honestly could have even been better. Nonetheless, though, 15.8 fantasy points in PPR formats, we will take that. So I think moving forward, he's definitely a flex play. And if you're really hurting at wide receiver, he could really put you in that wide receiver 2 status. I know that we have a ton more bye weeks this week, mainly the Detroit Lions. So if you're missing Amon-Ra, I would definitely go pick up Tez Johnson because Emike Egbuka, he did get 9 fantasy points. But looks like Tez Johnson, K. Dotton, we're getting most of the volume in Monday night's game. We'll see if that happens. Moving on to their next matchup against the New Orleans Saints team, which really struggles against the pass. I know that this past Sunday's game against the Bears was an outlier. Like Odunze had an okay game. He only had like 2 catches, DJ Moore is saying, but I expect Tampa Bay's offense to really shoot on all cylinders here. I think that the Buccaneers at least is going to put up 30 points against the Saints defense that is definitely at the bottom of the league there. So Tez Johnson, again, could get that receiving touchdown, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets like over 70 receiving yards in this game along with Emike Egbuka. I think that every wide receiver can really go off against the Saints. And he's only rostered in 16% of leagues, but like I mentioned, I expect this to be the most popular pickup of the week, so I expect that number to go up. Now let's go on to the next wide receiver. It's Malik Washington of the Miami Dolphins. And I know whenever you see the Miami Dolphins or the New York Jets offense, you don't really want to touch them. However, if we do get a Jalen Waddle trade, Malik Washington could definitely be, I'm not going to say he's going to be like a wide receiver 1 the rest of the season, but he could definitely be a viable option to you moving forward. Week 7 stats, it was just an awful game for this Dolphins offense. I mean, Tua looked abysmal, 3 interceptions. They had to bring in Quinn Ewers only 5 receptions, 30 yards. He was able to get to 13 fantasy points even in a type of game like that. It is a tough matchup once again against the Atlanta Falcons. They have really been solid on the defensive front. He is projected 12.6. We'll see if he gets there or not. The volume there is still there. He is getting a lot of targets. He actually was the leading target. So, even with Jalen Waddle on the field, but if we do get a Jalen Waddle, if we do get an injury or a trade to Waddle, that definitely opens up, a ton of targets to Malik Washington in this offense. He's only rostered in 14% of leagues. So at the very least, I know he's in a bad offense, but he is definitely getting the volume, even in a bad offense there. So pick him up if you can. Now let's move on to the tight ends. I know that this is going to be another popular pick, Rondé Gadsden, the second, the tight end from the Los Angeles Chargers. And let me tell you, he had himself a blow-up game on Sunday, even in the loss against the Indianapolis Colts. 7 receptions, 164 yards, and a touchdown, getting you to 29.4 fantasy points. And if you can get that every other week, we will take it, especially at the tight end position. Week 8 matchup, it is a tough one going up against the Minnesota Vikings defense, but the Chargers, it was a game last week against the Colts where you saw Justin Herbert put up a lot of passing yards. He had almost 400 passing yards. Does that happen again? No, but this is still a very talented offense. Looks like Rondé Gadsden, even with a lot of wide receivers getting involved, like Lat McConkey, Keenan Allen, and QJ. Rondé Gadsden is getting involved in this offense. So definitely go pick him up. And he's only rostered in 2% of leagues. That number is definitely going to tick up, especially with all these bye weeks and injuries to the tight end lately. So go pick up Rondé Gadsden. We're going to go back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This also ties into the Mike Evans injury. And you saw without Mike Evans, the ball was literally going to Emeka Egbuka, Cade Otton, and Tez Johnson. And Cade Otton was definitely the security blanket for Baker Mayfield whenever he was getting under pressure there against the Lions. But 7 receptions, 65 yards, good enough for a 13.5 fantasy outing against a tough Lions secondary, which was dealing with a lot of injuries, but you got to give credit to them. Like I mentioned, I love this matchup against the New Orleans Saints, so don't be shocked on my Wednesday night show if I have a lot of Buccaneers wide receivers and running backs because this is going to be I don't think that this matchup is going to be particularly close. I think that the Buccaneers really run away with this one against the New Orleans Saints. So he is projected to score 8.8 points against that Saints defense. And he is rostered in 30% of leagues. So all the players that we have looked at, he is definitely rostered in a lot of leagues so far. But if he is available to you on your waiver wire and if your tight end's on a bye week, definitely would be a streamable option because I think that everyone in this offense is getting a feast against the Saints defense on Sunday afternoon. So that is it for our Week 8 fantasy football waiver wire ads. Let me know which player that you are looking to target and what player that I missed. Definitely would like to know your thoughts on that. But I do appreciate everybody for tuning into today's video. Like I mentioned, definitely tune into tomorrow night's live stream where we're talking about the starts and sits and answering your trade questions as well. So definitely stay tuned to that. But I do appreciate everybody for tuning in today's video, and I will catch you all next time. So long for now.